Greetings, friends. It's me, Wayman, and this is a video going out to Sister Sunshine entitled Turning Off Your Brain Isn't an Option. And, Sister, I know you've been having some rough times, and I feel terrible about it. And I don't smoke, but I got a drink here. It's pretty strong. It's clear, so it's strong. But whenever you talk about such topics as death and religion, you should either be smoking or drinking, because it's a fair and foul topic. Now, I think maybe it's better to start with the goat herders, because maybe they knew something that we don't, or we've forgotten nowadays. And back when it was just them, they kind of had pathways or roadmaps on how to die, like what would happen. And you see a lot of this not only in Hebrew literature, as we're familiar with, like the Old Testament and all that, but also in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And one of the most moving texts that I've read on the process of dying was by an author who helped cancer patients. It was called the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, and there outlined the process of death. It told people where they were, at what point. And before everything was global, before everything was assimilated, people had strict views about what made them who they were. So it wasn't only your ethnicity, but it was your state, your religious belief systems, and your philosophies, all united as a people. But when the assimilation process started happening, things started being added. So it's kind of like, and even in Job. So in your video you were discussing the moderates. You're right. They didn't like the terrible attributes of their deities, so they try to pass it off maybe as a Satan or as evil to kind of soften the blow. But I think an answer to that would be Job. And he said, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. So that's pretty interesting. And he said that he would defend his ways before God. So people don't have a hard time, say, with nature. Nature is both a creator and destroyer of men and of people. One side, the earth, is starving to death. The other side is overweight. You have famines and diseases. Just as nature grows crops, it can kill them off. We don't ask questions. We just accept it. And what's interesting is, in primitive cultures, your enemies were the bad guys, obviously. So to fight assimilation and to fight for your very own existence, you had to sometimes have extreme views with extreme measures and anti-assimilation measures, just for your own survival. We wouldn't see that today because we live in a global society. So a lot of these ideas filter up through. Now when they're assimilated, people all of a sudden realized that it wasn't the other guys or their enemies that were getting tortured, say in the underworld or some hell, but it ended up being their friends who disagreed with them. And they seen it was a horrible thing. So I think that's where we are today. But like the friends of Job, people sit around, and I like to see it as kind of like Like you get a device, right? Kind of like a cell phone, and it's not. It's it's supposed to be 100% when they hand it to you. They talk it up, but you start finding problems with it, and they're saying, no, 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 it's not the operating system. It's you, you dummy. You're the problem. But the device is shit. The device is shit. And they got a bunch of bozos who created it and are trying to run it. And it's not tightly managed. So the friends of Job started creating their own apps to put on this device that weren't tested at all. And at first appearance, they look cool and they might work, but not in every situation. And the user, in their view, was the problem, and not the operating system or the device. And what we need today are a bunch of A players to fix the device, have conversations not only on life, but also on death, and to figure out a better way of discussing it and talking about it. And I think that as the society and culture assimilates with others and progress, it needs to progress. And if it doesn't, we end up with the useless symbols that have lost their numinosity and are no longer potent, and the roadmap is not there, and we turn a blind eye to death. And we reach a point in our lives when we're no longer looking forward, but we're looking backwards. We're no longer thinking about the things we're going to do, but rather the things that we've already done. And we find that in today's society, there's no roadmap for that. I'm not for deathbed confessions because I think it's kind of like an example of torture. Not that it is torture, but like torture, where somebody under duress would say anything. And I think that if all my family members were there, and my dear parents, who I knew that if I didn't say that I confessed, would suffer their whole lives mentally, worrying about me in the flames of the underworld, I may lie to them just so they would not have to worry about it. Why would I want to put them through that type of torture if I knew it? So I think that when talking about death, it needs to be done in a much better way. We don't talk about it enough. We try to ignore it. There's plenty of pathways to life. We got Botox, we got plastic surgery, all those things, ironing out the wrinkles. But when we get right there, we no longer have a pathway to death like the goat herders did. And I think that's what we're missing. And life is a fair and foul thing. And maybe we're all Jobs sitting on the ash pile while both the gods or nature beat the shit out of us. And we have to, in some way, reconcile that. So all the preachers that preach God is love, the same deity, wouldn't think twice about cutting you down. And Job was more moral than the deity. But yet, he decided to stick with the deity. Men are more moral than nature. Nature doesn't have compassion, but men need nature to live. So I think it's a good conversation to have, and it's conversations that, even though we see it every day among us, death comes, and you wonder why it wasn't yourself. You feel kind of guilty that it was that baby or that loved one. Why not me? And death has that conversation when it arrives at its appointed time. And sometimes we like to preserve, romanticize the memories of our loved ones. and sometimes we might jump all over people who think otherwise, but everybody has their own way of grieving, and some actually, and I know that probably you have felt this way, a great responsibility for not converting somebody and they pass on. It's very heartfelt, it's very sincere, and it's a very big concern, both mentally and sometimes physically. You're just broken down. And I think right now, we're all at the place where death has just become more relevant. We've come to the place where we just can't ignore it anymore. So, no, you're right. You can't turn your brain off, but also you can't turn your unconscious off. There still needs to be some symbol, some stand-in between the unconscious and the conscious, because we don't know enough about the unconscious yet, and we don't know enough about the conscious yet. I know this sounds like mumbo jumbo, but it's probably because I'm drinking here. I don't know everything about it, but I guess maybe the thing to do is to run towards our fate. And like Hector, running towards our fate. And like Job, maybe shaking our fists at the divine and saying that we are right. We are more moral sometimes, and we'll explain it later. And just taking nature as she comes. If she knocks your house down in an earthquake, you rebuild. So, I don't know, sister. I think that the device is broke, and I think that the wrong message has been preached by Christianity, portraying God and the theology as loving and compassionate, when in fact there is not only a right hand of God, there's also a terrible left hand that people don't like to talk about. And the moderates are nothing but the friends of Job. Maybe coming in to make you feel better, but they're not giving you a roadmap to death. Take care, friends. Be well, sister. Thinking about your dog. Hopefully things go well with that. Remember, people, if everybody's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking.